Imagine being the weakest species in a galaxy ruled by cosmic titans, beings who could shatter planets with a thought and bend reality to their will. Now imagine those same titans coming to you, trembling, begging for help against something so terrifying that even gods fear it. This is the story of how humanity, dismissed as primitive apes by the mighty NIGMA, became the last hope against an extinction that devours entire dimensions. When the universe's apex predators ignored our desperate warnings about the void touched, they thought their arrogance would save them. They were catastrophically wrong. What follows is the account of how Earth's insignificant children taught the cosmos that sometimes the smallest voice carries the most crucial truth, and that underestimating humanity is a mistake that entire civilizations don't live to regret twice. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the crystalline halls of the NIGMA High Council, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering alien dignitaries surrounding her. The chamber itself defied physics as humans understood it, walls that shifted between dimensions, gravity that flowed like water, and air that tasted of starlight and ancient power. The NIGMA had built this place as a testament to their supremacy, and every molecule within it sang of their dominance over lesser species. The High Executor, a being of pure energy contained within a shell of living metal, regarded Sarah with what she could only interpret as cosmic disdain. Its voice resonated through dimensions when it spoke, each word carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. Ambassador Chen of the Human Collective? The High Executor's tone dripped with condescension. You have requested this audience under the Treaty of Minor Species Recognition. State your business quickly. The NIGMA Empire has little time for the concerns of developing worlds. Sarah had prepared for this moment for 3 years. Earth's greatest xenobiologists, military strategists, and diplomats had briefed her on every aspect of NIGMA: culture, psychology, and communication protocols. Yet standing here, feeling the casual contempt radiating from beings who could unmake solar systems with a thought, she understood why so many human ambassadors had failed before her. Honored High Executor, she began, following the prescribed diplomatic formalities. I come bearing urgent intelligence regarding a threat to all sentient life in our galactic cluster. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalous readings from the Kepler void, readings that suggest the awakening of entities our ancient archives refer to as the void touched. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled NIGMA counselors. The High Executor's energy form pulsed with brighter intensity, which Sarah's cultural briefings had taught her indicated either extreme interest or extreme irritation. Given the context, she suspected the latter. The void touched, repeated Councillor Zixtai, a crystalline entity whose thoughts moved at light speed. The humans speak of myths and legends as if they were tactical intelligence. How? Quaint. With respect, Councillor, Sarah pressed forward, knowing she might not get another chance. These are not myths. 17 of our deep space observation posts have gone dark in the past 6 months. The pattern of their disappearance follows historical accounts of void-touched incursions dating back 40,000 years. Our xenoarchaeologists have found corroborating evidence on 7 different worlds, civilizations that left warnings about entities that consume not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself. The High Executor's form shifted, adopting a more solid appearance, a sure sign that Sarah had managed to capture its attention. Around the chamber, other NIGMA counselors began manifesting their physical forms as well, emerging from their preferred states of pure thought or energy. This was unprecedented in diplomatic records. You speak of xenoarchaeological evidence, said Councillor Morden, a warrior caste NIGMA whose body was a living weapon of biomechanical perfection. What evidence could primitive humans possibly possess that the NIGMA Empire, with our million-year recorded history, would not already know? Sarah activated her holo display, and the air filled with images that had cost human lives to obtain. Ancient ruins on dead worlds, warning beacons left by civilizations that had vanished without trace, and most chilling of all, the readings from humanity's most distant monitoring stations before they went silent. This is the Xerian beacon, discovered on a dead world in the Tau Ceti system, she explained, highlighting a structure that seemed to bend light around itself. The message it contains is written in 17 different languages, all from species that vanished from the galactic record approximately 40,000 years ago. Each message is identical. They come from the spaces between spaces. They hunger for what was, what is, and what could be. When the void stirs, when reality bleeds, run to the far galaxies and hope they do not follow. Counselor Zixthai's crystalline form rang with harmonic frequencies that Sarah's translator rendered as laughter. Human, you present us with ghost stories. The NIGMA Empire has ruled this galaxy for millennia. We have encountered every form of life, every type of threat, every cosmic phenomenon that exists. If these void-touched were real, we would have documented them long ago. That's exactly the problem, Sarah said, her voice carrying a desperate edge. They don't leave survivors to document them. Every species that has encountered them has been completely erased, not just killed, but removed from existence so thoroughly that only archaeological fragments remain to prove they ever existed at all. The High Executor's energy form pulsed with what Sarah hoped was consideration. Even if we were to accept this fantastic claim, why would the NIGA Empire concern itself with threats that allegedly destroyed inferior civilizations? We possess the power to reshape matter at the quantum level, to manipulate space-time itself. What could possibly threaten us? Sarah had anticipated this response. The NIGMA Empire's arrogance was legendary throughout the galaxy, matched only by their power. They had conquered every species they had ever encountered, absorbed their technology, and improved upon it. To them, the concept of an unconquerable enemy was literally incomprehensible. According to our analysis of the archaeological evidence, Sarah continued, the void-touched don't operate within the normal laws of physics. They exist in the quantum foam beneath reality itself, in the spaces where existence hasn't solidified into matter and energy. They feed on ordered reality, consuming it and leaving behind nothing. Not even vacuum. True void. Fascinating science fiction, Morden commented, his weapon arms shifting restlessly, but hardly a concern for beings who can manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Sarah felt her frustration building. She had known this would be difficult, but the sheer dismissiveness of the NIGAM counselors was beyond her worst expectations. These beings wielded power that made humanity's greatest weapons seem like toys, yet they couldn't conceive of a threat. They couldn't simply overpower. High Executor, she said, abandoning diplomatic protocol. 3 weeks ago, our monitoring station at the edge of the Kepler void detected a massive reality distortion. The space-time in that region is unraveling. Whatever's causing it is moving toward inhabited systems at a rate that suggests it will reach the outer colonies within 2 years. Outer colonies, scoffed Councillor Veltar, Enigma whose body was composed of living star matter. Human colonies, insignificant settlements that barely qualify as civilization. Question 53. The trajectory analysis shows it heading for the core systems after that, Sarah shot back, including NIGMA worlds. The chamber fell silent for a moment, and Sarah could feel the alien minds around her processing this information through their vast computational capabilities. When the High Executor spoke again, its voice carried a new note of what might have been curiosity. You have brought us unsubstantiated claims about mythical entities supported only by archaeological fragments and readings from primitive human technology. It said, yet you speak with the conviction of one who believes these claims absolutely. Why should we not simply dismiss you, as we have dismissed so many other prophets of doom? Sarah had prepared for this question as well. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a data crystal that gleamed with an inner light unlike anything the NIGMA had ever seen. Because, she said, we didn't just find evidence of the void touched. We found a survivor. The reaction was immediate and electric. Every NIGA in the chamber focused their full attention on the crystal in Sarah's hand. Their various forms of existence suddenly unified in their intensity. Impossible, breathed Zixthai. You said no one survives encounters with these entities. No organic being survives, Sarah corrected. But 40,000 years ago, one civilization managed to upload the consciousness of their greatest scholar into a quantum storage matrix before their world was consumed. Our xenocomputer specialists spent 2 years learning to communicate with it. This crystal contains its testimony. The High Executor's form solidified completely for the first time in recorded diplomatic history, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape of pure starlight. You have brought an ancient artificial consciousness before the NIGMA High Council? This alone is a violation of 17 different treaty protocols. The protocols don't matter if there's no one left alive to enforce them, Sarah said bluntly. This entity, it calls itself the Last Archivist, has been waiting for 40,000 years to warn someone about the void touched. It knows their patterns, their methods, their weaknesses. Weaknesses? Morden leaned forward, his warrior instincts engaging. You claim these entities have weaknesses? Sarah nodded. According to the archivist, the void touched can only exist in the spaces between realities. They need quantum instability to manifest in our universe. The ancient civilizations they destroyed all made the same mistake. They tried to fight them with conventional weapons and energy-based attacks, but the void touched feed on ordered energy. The more power you throw at them, the stronger they become. Then how does one fight them? Asked the High Executor. You don't fight them, Sarah said grimly. You deny them access to our reality by stabilizing the quantum foam they use to breach our dimension. The archivist species had developed the theoretical framework for such a defense, but they were consumed before they could implement it. Councillor Veltar's star matter form flared with skepticism. And you expect us to believe that primitive humans have succeeded where a species advanced enough to upload consciousness to quantum matrices had failed? We haven't succeeded yet, Sarah admitted. But we've made progress. Our quantum physicists have been working around the clock to develop technology based on the archivist's data. We call it a reality anchor, a device that can stabilize space-time at the quantum level and prevent dimensional breaches. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could sense the NIGMA counselors communicating through their quantum-entangled consciousness networks, debating her claims at speeds beyond human comprehension. Finally, the High Executor spoke. Even if we were to accept your claims about these void-touched entities, why would humanity warn the NIGMA Empire? We have shown your species little kindness. We regard you as barely above animals. Why would you risk your ambassador's life to warn us? Sarah had known this question would come, and she had an answer that she hoped would resonate with beings who had conquered galaxies. Because, she said, if the NIGMA Empire falls, humanity falls with it. We're not strong enough to face the void touched alone. No single species is. According to the archivist, the only way to stop them is through coordinated action across multiple civilizations, using combined resources and technology that no one species possesses. You speak of cooperation between the NIGMA Empire and lesser species, Zixtai observed. This is unprecedented. So is an extinction-level threat that consumes reality itself, Sarah countered. The archivist's records show that the void touched have awakened every 40,000 years throughout galactic history. Each time, they consume everything in their path until they've fed enough to return to dormancy. The only variables are how far they spread before going dormant again, and whether anything survives to rebuild. Mordun's weapon arms shifted into sensor configurations. Show us this archivist's testimony. If what you claim is true, the NIGMA Empire must evaluate this threat. Sarah activated the data crystal, and the air above it shimmered as the archivist's consciousness manifested as a holographic projection. The entity that appeared was unlike anything in the NIGMA's extensive xenobiological databases, a geometric pattern of light and mathematics that hurt to look at directly. When the archivist spoke, its voice carried the weight of eons and the despair of the last survivor of a dead civilization. I am the last archivist of the Zephyrian Collective, it said. I have waited 40,000 years to deliver this warning. The void-touched stir once again. They come as they have always come, not as conquerors seeking to rule, but as entropy-given form seeking to unmake all that is. Your weapons will not save you. Your armies will not save you. Your technology will only feed them. Only unity and understanding can prevail against the hunger between the stars. The NIGMA counselors absorbed this testimony in stunned silence. Here was proof that went beyond archaeological fragments and sensor readings, a first-hand account from a being that had witnessed the destruction of its entire civilization. The High Executor was the first to speak. Archivist, you claim that conventional warfare is useless against these entities? What other options exist? The void-touched exist in quantum flux, the archivist replied. They breach reality through instabilities in space-time. If the quantum foam can be stabilized across a wide enough area, they cannot manifest. My people called this theoretical defense the Great Anchoring, a network of quantum stabilizers that would lock reality itself into a stable configuration. The energy requirements for such a project would be enormous, Veltar calculated aloud. It would require the combined output of multiple stellar-class civilizations, which is why no single species has ever succeeded in implementing it. The archivist confirmed. The void-touched consumes civilizations one at a time, preventing the cooperation necessary for an effective defense. Only by working together can you hope to survive. Sarah watched the NIGMA counselors process this information, seeing the first cracks in their supreme confidence. The possibility of a threat they couldn't simply overpower was forcing them to consider concepts that went against their fundamental nature. Cooperation with lesser species, acknowledgement of limitations, and humility in the face of cosmic forces beyond their control. Human ambassador, the High Executor said finally. Assume for the moment that we accept these claims. What specific assistance does humanity offer the NIGMA Empire?
We offer the archivist's complete database, Sarah replied.
40,000 years of compiled knowledge about the void touched, their patterns, their methods, and the theoretical framework for the Great Anchoring. We also offer our quantum research facilities and the preliminary reality anchor prototypes we've developed. In exchange for what? Morden asked suspiciously. Access to NIGMA quantum manipulation technology, Sarah said. Our prototypes work, but they're limited in range and power. With your quantum mastery, we could build stabilizers powerful enough to protect entire star systems. The chamber erupted in harmonics and energy discharges as the NIGMA counselors reacted to this proposal. The idea of sharing their advanced technology with a species they considered primitive was almost incomprehensible to them. Impossible, Zixthai declared. NIGMA technology has never been shared with lesser species. It is against our fundamental principles. So is Extinction, Sarah pointed out. According to the archivist, the last major void-touched incursion consumed 17 civilizations before returning to dormancy. 17 entire species wiped from existence so completely that only fragments remain. How many civilizations are in this galaxy now? The answer hung unspoken in the air. The NIGMA Empire ruled over thousands of species across millions of worlds. If the void touched achieved the same scale of destruction as their last awakening, the galaxy would be largely empty by the time they returned to dormancy. High Executor, Sarah pressed. You have the power to save not just the NIGMA Empire, but every thinking being in this galaxy.
The only question is whether pride is more important than survival.
The energy being that ruled an empire pulsed with conflicting emotions, anger at being challenged by a primitive human, fear at the implications of the testimony they had just witnessed, and something that might have been the first stirring of wisdom in a species that had never known defeat. The High Council will deliberate on your proposal, the High Executor announced finally. You will remain as our guest while we evaluate this evidence and consult our own archives for any corroborating information. Sarah bowed deeply, recognizing both the honor and the threat implicit in the High Executor's words. Being a guest of the NIGMA Empire could mean comfortable diplomatic quarters or a stasis cell from which she might never emerge. As she was escorted from the chamber by beings whose casual presence warped reality around them, Sarah couldn't help but think of the words the archivist had spoken privately to humanity's leaders. The proud always fall first, for they cannot bend until it is too late. Your species' greatest strength may be that you know what it means to be small. Walking through corridors that defied physics, surrounded by the casual miracles of NIGMA technology, Sarah wondered if humanity's warnings had come soon enough, or if the galaxy was about to learn the true meaning of cosmic horror from entities that made even gods tremble in fear. Behind her in the High Council chamber, the most powerful beings in the galaxy struggled with a concept that was foreign to their nature, the possibility that their supreme confidence might be the very thing that doomed them all. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Sarah Chen delivered humanity's warning to the NIGMA High Council, and the galaxy had become a very different place. The initial dismissal and arrogance that had characterized the Empire's response had given way to something far more dangerous: divided opinion and political maneuvering that paralyzed decisive action. Admiral Marcus Rivera stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, humanity's most advanced starship, watching the construction of what would either be salvation or a monument to futility. The reality anchor prototype hung in space before him, a crystalline structure the size of a city that pulsed with energies that made his teeth ache even through the ship's shielding. Around it, human and NIGMA construction vessels worked in an uneasy partnership that had taken months of careful diplomacy to achieve. Status report, Lieutenant, Rivera commanded, never taking his eyes off the massive construction project. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, one of humanity's leading experts on quantum mechanics, consulted her holographic displays with practiced efficiency. The primary resonance chambers are operating at 97% efficiency, sir. The NIGMA quantum manipulators have exceeded all our expectations, but we're still having integration issues with their temporal stabilizers. Rivera nodded grimly. The Reality Anchor project had become a symbol of everything that was both promising and frustrating about human NIGMA cooperation. When it worked, the combination of human innovation and NIGMA power was breathtaking. When it didn't, the cultural differences between species became glaring obstacles. What's the word from the political front? Rivera asked. Kim's expression darkened. Not good, sir. The NIGMA High Council is still deadlocked. The progressive faction, led by Councillor Moore Dunn, supports the Joint Defence Project, but the supremacy faction is gaining ground. They're calling the whole thing a human deception designed to gain access to NIGMA technology. And the High Executor? Maintaining neutrality while the factions debate. Ambassador Chen thinks he's genuinely torn between skepticism about the threat and fear of being wrong. Rivera understood the High Executor's position better than he cared to admit. The evidence for the void touched was compelling but circumstantial, and the political cost of being wrong was enormous. If the Enigma Empire committed its vast resources to defending against a threat that never materialized, the High Executor would face a loss of credibility that could topple his government. If he dismissed the threat and it proved real, there might not be a government left to face consequences. Sir, Kim continued, there's something else. We've been receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The anomalous readings from the Kepler void are intensifying. Dr. Elizabeth Torres at Research Station Alpha 7 believes we're seeing preliminary dimensional destabilization. Rivera felt his stomach tighten. Dr. Torres was humanity's foremost expert on quantum field theory and had been instrumental in developing the reality anchor technology. If she was concerned, the situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated. Put me through to Alpha 7, Rivera ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the interior of Research Station Alpha 7, a facility built around the largest quantum computer humanity had ever constructed. Dr. Torres appeared, her usual calm demeanor, replaced by barely controlled urgency. Admiral Rivera, she said without preamble, we have a problem. The distortions in the Kepler void aren't just intensifying. They're following a pattern that matches the archivist's historical data perfectly. Whatever's happening out there is accelerating. Rivera leaned forward. How long do we have? Based on current progression rates, I estimate 6 to 8 months before the first dimensional breach occurs. Once that happens, the void touched will begin manifesting in our reality. The Admiral felt the weight of an entire galaxy settling on his shoulders. 8 months to complete a project that should have taken years, while half of their potential allies still debated whether the threat was real. Dr. Torres, what's the status of the prototype? The reality anchor is functional, but its range is limited, Torres replied. We can stabilize space-time across roughly a 10-light-year radius, enough to protect a single star system. To defend the galaxy, we'd need hundreds of similar installations, all perfectly synchronized and operating at maximum efficiency. Can we build them in time? Torres hesitated. With full NIGMA cooperation and unlimited resources, possibly. But Admiral, we're not getting full cooperation. Half the Empire still considers this a waste of time and resources. Rivera closed the connection and turned to stare out at the vast construction project spinning slowly in space. The reality anchor represented the pinnacle of combined human-NIGMA engineering, but it was just one installation against a threat that could consume entire galaxies. Lieutenant, he said quietly, get me a secure channel to Earth. I need to speak with the Council. While Rivera dealt with the political and military challenges of the Joint Defense Project, Ambassador Sarah Chen faced her own battles in the corridors of power within the NIGMA Empire. The alien political structure was unlike anything in human experience, a complex web of competing philosophies and power blocks that could shift allegiances in microseconds as new information became available. Chen stood in what the NIGMA called a consensus chamber, a space where multiple counselors could merge their consciousness temporarily to share thoughts and experiences directly. As the only human present, she remained locked in her individual perception while beings of unimaginable power literally shared minds around her. The human speaks of threats and cooperation, transmitted Counselor Zixtai, her crystalline form resonating with skeptical harmonics. Yet her species has contributed nothing to galactic civilization except primitive aggression and emotional instability. The humans have provided the archivist and the preliminary reality anchor designs, responded Councillor Morden, his warrior instincts favoring direct action over endless debate. Their warnings have been consistent and detailed. We ignore them at our peril. Peril from what? Challenged Councillor Veltar, his star matter form flaring with dismissive energy. Archaeological fragments and sensor readings from primitive equipment? The NIGMA Empire has faced and conquered every threat in known space. What could possibly challenge our dominion? Chen had listened to variations of this same argument for months, watching as the Empire's greatest strength, their supreme confidence in their own abilities, became their greatest weakness when faced with a threat beyond their experience. Honored counselors, she interjected, may I suggest a different perspective? You debate whether the void-touched exist because you have never encountered anything you couldn't defeat. But consider this. Every species they've consumed had that same confidence until the moment they were erased from existence.
The chamber fell silent as the NIGMA counselors processed her words.
Chen continued, pressing what might be her only advantage. The archivist's records show a consistent pattern across 40,000 years of galactic history. Advanced civilizations detect the early signs, dismiss them as irrelevant, and continue with their normal activities until reality itself begins to unravel around them. By then, it's too late for effective resistance. Counselor Zixthai's crystalline structure rang with what Chen's translator rendered as contemplative notes. You suggest that our strength is our weakness. An interesting paradox. I suggest that overconfidence is a universal weakness, Chen replied. The Zephyrian Collective thought their technology could protect them. The Andorian Federation believed their psychic abilities made them immune. The crystalline hegemony was convinced their mastery over matter and energy would prevail. They were all wrong. And you believe humanity knows better? Veltar challenged. I believe humanity knows what it's like to be vulnerable, Chen answered honestly. We've faced extinction multiple times in our history. From natural disasters, from our own conflicts, from cosmic events beyond our control. We've learned that survival sometimes requires admitting you're outmatched and asking for help. The concept of asking for help was so foreign to NIGMA psychology that Chen could feel the confusion rippling through their merged consciousness. These beings had never needed assistance from anyone or anything. The very idea of acknowledging limitations was almost incomprehensible to them. The human raises an intriguing point, transmitted a new voice. Counselor Sindar, an ancient NIGMA whose consciousness predated the Empire itself. Perhaps our examination of this threat has been incomplete because we have viewed it through the lens of conventional conflict. If these void-touched operate outside normal physical laws, conventional analysis may be insufficient. Chen felt a spark of hope. Sindar was one of the oldest and most respected voices in the Empire, and her support could shift the entire debate. Counselor Sindar speaks wisdom, Mordan agreed. We have treated this as a military question when it may be a fundamental challenge to our understanding of reality itself. Then what do you propose? Asked the High Executor, his energy form manifesting in the chamber for the first time in the debate. That we restructure our entire civilization around warnings from primitive humans? I propose that we conduct a proper investigation, Sindar replied. If humanity has provided accurate intelligence about these void-touched, there should be corroborating evidence in our own historical archives. Let us search for patterns we may have previously overlooked. The suggestion sparked intense debate among the counselors, but Chen could sense a shift in the overall consensus. Fear was beginning to outweigh pride, and the possibility of being wrong was starting to seem less acceptable than the certainty of taking action. 3 hours later, as the consensus chamber dissolved and the counselors returned to their individual forms, Chen found herself approached by Counselor Mordoon. The warrior caste NIGMA towered over her, his biomechanical form radiating controlled power. Human ambassador, he said. I have been reviewing the construction reports from the Reality Anchor project. The progress is impressive, but insufficient for galaxy-wide defense. Chen nodded. Admiral Rivera has the same concerns. We need massive scaling of the program, and that requires empire-wide commitment. Which we do not have, Mordan observed grimly. Half the council still views this as human deception or paranoid fantasy. They will not authorize the resources necessary for effective defense. Then what do you suggest? Mordan was quiet for a moment, and Chen could sense him calculating possibilities through his quantum-enhanced consciousness. There may be another option, he said finally. The Empire maintains emergency protocols for existential threats. Procedures that bypass normal political processes in favor of immediate action. Chen felt her pulse quicken. What kind of emergency protocols? Military mobilization under Supremacy Doctrine 7, Mordoon explained. If the High Executor determines that the Empire faces immediate existential threat, he can authorize unlimited resource allocation and conscript civilian assets for defense purposes. It's never been used in recorded history. Because the Empire has never faced an existential threat before, Chen realized. Exactly. But activating Supremacy Doctrine 7 requires absolute proof of imminent danger. Sensor readings and archaeological evidence may not be sufficient. Chen understood the implication. They needed something more dramatic than theoretical threats and ancient warnings. They needed undeniable proof that the void touched were real and dangerous. What would constitute absolute proof, she asked. Morden's weapon arms shifted into their combat configuration, a sure sign of his inattention. Direct encounter and survival. Someone would need to travel to the Kepler void, document the dimensional instabilities firsthand, and return with proof that cannot be dismissed or rationalized away. The suggestion hung in the air between them like a death sentence. The Kepler void was 30 light-years from the nearest inhabited system, surrounded by space-time distortions that made faster-than-light travel increasingly unreliable. Any expedition would be traveling directly toward the source of the dimensional breakdown, with no guarantee of survival or successful return. How soon would such an expedition need to depart? Chen asked, though she already suspected the answer. Immediately, Morden replied. The distortions are intensifying daily. Within weeks, the area may become completely inaccessible to normal space travel. Chen felt the weight of decision settling upon her. As humanity's primary representative to the NIGMA, she had the authority to authorize such a mission. But she also had the responsibility for the lives that would be risked in the attempt. I'll need to consult with Earth Command, she said. There is no time for extended consultation, Morden warned. The High Council reconvenes in 18 hours to make a final decision on the Reality Anchor project. If you cannot provide absolute proof by then, the project will likely be abandoned in favor of conventional military preparations. Chen closed her eyes and thought of the archivist's testimony, of the warnings echoing across 40,000 years, of 17 civilizations erased so completely that only fragments remained to prove they had ever existed. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. I'll go myself, she said. Morden's biomechanical form registered what Chen's translator interpreted as surprise. Ambassador, you are not equipped for such a mission. The journey would require quantum shielding and dimensional stabilizers that only our most advanced vessels possess. Then provide them, Chen replied firmly. If the NIGMA Empire needs absolute proof, I'll get it for you. But I want Admiral Rivera and a full human science team aboard the expedition. If we're going to face the void touched, we're going to face them together. Morden studied her with senses that could analyze matter at the subatomic level. You would risk your life to convince an empire that considers your species barely above animals? I would risk my life to save a galaxy full of thinking beings, Chen corrected. Including the stubborn, arrogant, incredibly powerful beings who might be our only hope of survival. The warrior caste counselor's form shifted in what Chen had learned to recognize as approval. Perhaps there is more to humanity than our files suggest, he said. Very well, Ambassador. I will authorize the expedition and provide the finest vessel in our fleet. But understand, if you survive to return with proof, you will have given the NIGMA Empire the greatest gift in its history. If you fail, you will have doomed both our species to extinction. Chen nodded solemnly. Then I guess I'd better not fail. As she walked away from Morden through corridors that bent space around them, Chen couldn't help but think of the ancient human saying, sometimes you have to go through hell to reach heaven. She was about to find out if that applied to traveling through dimensional voids to save the galaxy. Behind her, Morden watched the small human figure disappear into the impossible geometry of the NIGMA vessel. And for the first time in his long existence, he found himself hoping that a species he had once considered inferior might prove to be the salvation of everything he had sworn to protect. The NIGMA vessel Infinite Convergence emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler void, and Ambassador Sarah Chen immediately understood why so many monitoring stations had gone silent. Reality itself was sick here. Through the ship's quantum-enhanced viewports, space appeared to be melting. Stars flickered in and out of existence, their light arriving from impossible directions. Gravity flowed like water, creating tidal effects that should have torn the ship apart, but somehow didn't. Most disturbing of all, the cosmic background radiation, the fundamental echo of the universe's birth, was simply absent in vast patches of space, as if sections of reality had been carefully cut away. By the prime equations, whispered Dr. Bohr. HFY, the expedition's NIGMA quantum physicist, his crystalline form resonating with frequencies that spoke of profound unease. The dimensional substrate is completely destabilized. This shouldn't be possible without exotic matter concentrations that would collapse space-time into a black hole. Admiral Rivera, commanding the human portion of the expedition, studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. It's not exotic matter, he said grimly. According to these readings, it's the opposite, an absence of matter so complete that it's creating negative pressure on the quantum vacuum itself. Chen stood between the human and NIGMA sections of the bridge, watching two of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations struggle to understand something that defied their combined knowledge. The ship's hybrid crew, human engineers working alongside NIGMA technicians, xenobiologists comparing notes with entities that existed as pure thought, represented the kind of cooperation she had dreamed of when this crisis began. Now, faced with the reality of what they were investigating, she wondered if even their combined efforts would be sufficient.
Captain Zorthol, she addressed the NIGA My Ship commander, how close can we get to the source of the distortions? The energy being that captained the vessel pulsed with calculations that hurt to observe directly. Unknown, Ambassador. Our quantum shielding is designed to protect against conventional spatial anomalies, not dimensional dissolution. We may be able to approach within 50,000 kilometers of the primary distortion, but beyond that point, the ship's structural integrity cannot be guaranteed. That should be close enough for detailed scans, said Dr. Elena Santos, humanity's leading expert on dimensional physics. If the void touched are preparing to breach into our reality, we should be able to detect the preparatory quantum fluctuations at that range. The ship moved deeper into the void, its passage leaving strange wakes in spacetime that took minutes to heal. Chen watched the sensor displays with fascination and growing dread as patterns emerged from the chaos. The seemingly random distortions weren't random at all. They followed mathematical progressions that suggested vast intelligence directing the process of reality dissolution.
Admiral, Santos called urgently. I'm reading massive quantum field oscillations directly ahead. Something big is happening.
The viewports polarized automatically as space itself began to glow with energies that had no names in any known physics. Chen felt her inner ear protest as local gravity shifted without warning, and she gripped her command station to keep from being thrown across the bridge.
Full stop, Rivera ordered. All sensors on maximum gain.
I want to know exactly what we're looking at. What they were looking at, Chen realized with mounting horror, was a hole in the universe. Not a black hole, which was merely matter and energy compressed beyond normal limits. This was a true void, a spherical region of space where existence itself had been completely removed. Through it, she could see nothing. Not darkness, not empty space, but the absolute absence of everything that could exist, had existed, or might exist. Dimensional breach confirmed. Doctor, Santos reported, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. Radius approximately 5,000 kilometers and expanding at a rate of 1 meter per second. At current expansion rate, it will reach critical mass for dimensional stability in approximately 18 hours. Critical mass? Chen asked, though she dreaded the answer. The point at which the breach becomes self-sustaining and begins expanding exponentially, Santos explained. Once it reaches that size, nothing in our universe will be able to stop it from consuming everything. Captain Zarthol's energy form flared with alarm.
You are certain of this calculation?
I'm certain that this matches the theoretical models for dimensional collapse that we developed based on the Archivist's data, Santos replied. The void isn't just empty space, it's the complete absence of the quantum foam that underlies reality itself, and it's growing. Chen stared at the impossibility before them and felt the weight of galactic civilization pressing down on her shoulders. Here was the absolute proof that Councillor Mordoon had demanded, but she was beginning to understand why no previous expedition had ever returned to deliver such proof. How could anyone adequately describe something that negated the very concept of existence? We need to get closer, she said. Every being on the bridge turned to stare at her with expressions of disbelief that transcended species barriers. Ambassador, Rivera said carefully. With respect, we're already at the maximum safe distance. The quantum shielding is operating at 90 to 8% capacity just to keep us stable at this range. The NIGMA High Council isn't going to accept our word that this thing is dangerous, Chen replied. They need to see it for themselves, and a recording from 50,000 kilometers away won't convince them. We need to document the phenomenon at close range, close enough that the evidence cannot be dismissed or rationalized away. Dr. Keffar's crystalline form rang with harmonics of protest. Ambassador Chen, at closer range we risk being consumed by the very phenomenon we are attempting to document. The void appears to have active properties. It is not simply expanding, but actively reaching toward areas of stable reality. Which is exactly why the evidence has to be undeniable, Chen insisted. Look at the data. We have 18 hours before this becomes unstoppable. Even if we leave right now and push the ship to maximum speed, we won't reach NIGMA space for 12 hours. That leaves 6 hours for the High Council to debate, authorize the emergency protocols, and begin implementing them.
We need evidence so compelling that they act immediately. Rivera studied the tactical displays with the expression of a man calculating the odds of survival. Even if we accept the necessity of closer observation, there's the question of whether the ship can survive the approach. The quantum distortions are intensifying as we get closer to the breach. Then we don't take the ship, Chen said. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of exotic energies keeping them alive in this region of destabilized spacetime. When Rivera spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man who had just heard someone propose suicide. Sarah, you can't be serious. A smaller craft would have even less protection against the dimensional distortions. A smaller craft would also be more maneuverable and have a better chance of escaping if things go wrong, Chen countered. Besides, we don't need to survive long-term exposure. We just need to get close enough to take detailed recordings and return to testify about what we've seen. Captain Zorthel pulsed with what Chen had learned to recognize as deep consideration. The ship carries quantum-shielded reconnaissance pods designed for observation missions in hostile environments. They could theoretically protect a small crew for limited exposure to the dimensional distortions. How limited? Chen asked. Perhaps 30 minutes before the shielding fails, Zorthel replied. And that assumes the distortions do not intensify during the approach. Doctor. Santos looked up from her instruments with an expression of grim determination. I'll go. This is my area of expertise, and someone needs to take direct readings of the quantum field fluctuations around the breach. I'm going too, Chen said immediately. Ambassador, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary, Chen interrupted. I'm the one who has to convince the High Council. I need to be able to testify from first-hand experience, not second-hand reports. Rivera shook his head. I'm not sending a diplomat and a scientist alone into a region of space that's actively consuming reality. If you're going, I'm going. As am I, Dr. Kethvar added, his crystalline form resonating with resolve. The NIGM Empire must have a witness who can testify directly to the High Council through quantum consciousness transfer. Chen looked around at the volunteers and felt a mixture of gratitude and terror. These beings were willing to risk their lives based on her judgment about what evidence would be necessary to convince an alien government to take action. The responsibility was overwhelming. Very well, Captain Zorthel announced. I will prepare the reconnaissance pod for immediate departure. But understand, at the first sign that the quantum shielding is failing, you must retreat immediately. The galaxy cannot afford to lose the witnesses to this phenomenon. 30 minutes later, Shen found herself strapped into a craft that was part submarine, part spacecraft, and part quantum physics experiment. The reconnaissance pod's hull was lined with technology that bent the laws of physics, creating a bubble of stable space-time around the tiny vessel. Through the transparent quantum barriers, the universe outside looked increasingly surreal as they approached the dimensional breach. Admiral Rivera piloted the pod with steady hands while Dr. Santos monitored the environmental readings and Dr. Bit. Kethvar analyzed the quantum field fluctuations through instruments that existed partially outside normal space-time. Chen recorded everything, knowing that her testimony might be the only thing standing between galactic civilization and extinction. 10,000 kilometers and closing, Rivera reported. Quantum shielding holding at 95% efficiency. Outside the pod, space had become a nightmare of geometric impossibilities. Light moved in spirals, matter flickered between states of existence, and gravity formed standing waves that rippled through the vacuum like water. Ahead of them, the dimensional breach grew larger, its perfect spherical absence of everything becoming more terrifying as they approached. I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations around the breach perimeter, Santos reported. The boundary between the void and normal space is incredibly unstable. It's like reality is being constantly eroded and reformed at the molecular level. The mathematics are fascinating, Doctor, Kethvar added, his crystalline form pulsing with data flows. The void maintains perfect spherical geometry despite the chaotic distortions around it. This suggests active maintenance by intelligence rather than natural phenomenon. 5,000 kilometers, Rivera announced. Quantum shielding at 87%. Chen pressed her face to the viewport and stared directly into the abyss that stared back. The void wasn't simply empty, it was hungry. She could feel it pulling at the pod's quantum shielding, trying to drag them into the nothingness that lay beyond. More disturbing still, she could swear she sensed intelligence in that pull, as if something was actively trying to expand the breach by consuming their tiny craft. Admiral, Santos called urgently. I'm detecting movement inside the void. Everyone on the pod turned to stare at her.
That's impossible, Rivera said.
Movement requires space to move through. That's pure nothingness. I know what I'm reading, Santos insisted. There are structures inside the void. Geometric patterns that exist without requiring space or matter to define them. They're moving toward our position. Chen felt her blood turn to ice.
The void touched, she whispered. Through the viewport, she could see them now. Shapes that hurt to look at directly. Geometries that violated every law of physics and logic. They moved through the nothingness like predators through water, approaching the boundary between the void and normal space with clear intent. 2,000 kilometers, Rivera announced, his voice tight with concentration. Shielding at 78% and falling faster than projected. The entities are affecting our quantum field generators, Dr. Kethver observed with scientific detachment that didn't hide his underlying terror. Their very presence destabilizes the technology designed to protect us. One of the void touched, reached the boundary of the breach and pressed against the barrier between nothingness and existence. Where it touched, reality began to dissolve like acid eating through metal. The sphere of void expanded by several meters in an instant. They're feeding, Chen realized with horror. They're using their presence at the boundary to consume more reality and expand the breach. How many of them are there? Rivera asked. Santos checked her readings and went pale. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They're gathering at multiple points around the breach perimeter, all working to expand it. 1,000 kilometers, Rivera reported. Shielding at 62%. We need to turn back now if we're going to make it. Wait, Chen said, her diplomatic training warring with basic survival instinct. We need more data. How fast is the breach expanding now that they're actively working to enlarge it? Santos worked frantically over her instruments as the pod shook with quantum turbulence. Expansion rate has increased to 10 meters per second and accelerating. At this rate, it'll reach critical mass in 6 hours instead of 18. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Even if they left immediately and somehow convinced the NIGMA Council to act within hours, there wouldn't be enough time to implement any meaningful defense. Unless, Dr. Kethvar said slowly, his crystalline form pulsing with desperate calculation, the reality anchor prototype could be activated immediately. It's not ready, Rivera protested. The synchronization systems haven't been tested, the power coupling is still experimental, and the range is too limited to affect the breach from its current position. But it could be moved, Chen said, understanding what the NIGMA physicist was suggesting. If we could position it directly adjacent to the breach, could it stabilize the quantum foam enough to stop the expansion?
Theoretically possible, Dr. Kethvar confirmed.
But the activation would need to be immediate, and someone would need to remain at close range to manually calibrate the quantum resonance frequencies. The pod shook violently as another void touched pressed against the dimensional boundary. Through the viewport, Chen could see reality unraveling in slow motion, each consumed meter bringing galactic extinction measurably closer. 500 meters, Rivera announced. Shielding at 41%. We're leaving now.
No. Chen said firmly.
We stay long enough to test one more thing. Sarah, the shielding won't hold. Dr. Kethvar, Chen interrupted. Can you establish a quantum communication link with the reality anchor from this range? The crystalline being's form fled with desperate hope. Possible, but the interference from the dimensional distortions would make it extremely unreliable. Try it, Chen ordered. If we can establish remote activation protocols, someone might be able to trigger the reality anchor without requiring a suicide mission. As Dr. Kethvar worked frantically to establish the communication link, another void touched approached their position. This one was larger than the others, its impossible geometry suggesting vast intelligence and power. When it reached the dimensional boundary, it didn't simply press against the barrier between void and reality, it spoke. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying concepts that human and NIGMA languages had no words to express. But Chen understood it anyway, the meaning burning directly into her consciousness without requiring translation. Small lights in the darkness, it said.
You have come to witness the feeding.
How generous of reality to offer such concentrated existence for our consumption.
It's intelligent, Santos whispered in terror.
The void touched aren't just predators. They're conscious beings making deliberate choices about what to consume. We are the space between spaces. The entity continued, the hunger that gnaws at the edges of what is. Your reality anchor is amusing, a tiny spark of order in the face of infinite entropy.
But order exists only by our sufferance, and we no longer choose to suffer it.
Chen forced herself to respond, though speaking to an entity of living void felt like shouting into an abyss.
Why do you consume reality? What do you gain from destroying entire galaxies? Gain? The concept seemed to amuse the void touched. Small light, you think in terms of acquisition and purpose. We simply are, as entropy is, as the heat death of the universe is. We consume because existence itself is an aberration that must be corrected. Quantum link established. Dr.
Kefar announced suddenly. I have contact with the reality anchor, but the signal is degraded.
Remote activation may not be possible. The massive void touched turned its attention to their pod, and Chen felt the quantum shielding begin to fail under its scrutiny. 200 meters, Rivera called out. Shielding at 28%. We're out of time. Upload everything to the ship, Chen ordered. All sensor readings, all communications. Everything. If we don't make it back, at least the data will survive. As Rivera fought to extract their failing pod from the dimensional distortions, Chen watched the void touched continue their methodical consumption of reality. The breach expanded steadily, each meter of consumed space bringing cosmic extinction closer to inevitability. But she had what she came for: absolute proof that the threat was real, that it was intelligent, and that it would not be reasoned with or deterred. Now the only question was whether the pod would survive long enough to deliver that proof to the beings who might still save the galaxy. The journey back to the infinite convergence took 17 minutes that felt like hours. When they finally docked with the main ship, Chen barely had strength to unbuckle her restraints. But she forced herself to stand, forced herself to walk to the communication station, and forced herself to open a priority channel to the NIGMA High Council. High Executor, she said when the connection established. I have the proof you demanded. The void touched are real, they are active, and we have approximately 6 hours before they achieve unstoppable dimensional breach. I respectfully request immediate activation of Supremacy Doctrine 7 and full implementation of the Reality Anchor Network. The pause that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in NIGMA political communication. Ambassador Chen, the High Executor, replied finally, your transmission is being received. Stand by for emergency council session. All available resources are being mobilized. Chen collapsed into the nearest chair and closed her eyes. The universe's greatest crisis was now officially recognized, and the galaxy's most powerful civilization was finally taking action. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen, but at least the cosmic game of chance had begun in earnest. Outside the ship's viewport, the dimensional breach continued its inexorable expansion, counting down the final hours of ordered reality with mathematical precision. The NIGMA Empire ignored our warning until Extinction arrived. HFY Sci-Fi.